No man is more professional than I. I am a 1% man. I am not above or below any man. I'm training my mind. I'm building my body. I'm connecting to my soul. I'm investing my money. Welcome to the 1% Man Podcast. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. I want to welcome you back to the 1% Man Podcast. I got my good friend here with me, Chris Grenzig. Chris, I say your last name right.
Pretty damn close. Chris Grenzig, but yeah.
God dang it. I'm just going to take your advice and just say first names now.
That's the way to do it, man.
So Chris is a multifamily real estate investing expert. He has a dope and down to earth podcast called the Real Estate Investing Experience Podcast. And he owns 40 units with 30 million asset under management. Now we're going to know a little more about what that means. And he has a 10-year vision to scale to 500 million asset under management. Wow. That's pretty, okay. That's pretty dope. So what does, even before we dive in, Chris, I want to ask you 3 questions so the listeners and myself can get to know you better. Is that cool? So knowing everything you know right now, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
It's a good question. It was a lesson I think I learned and I'm still learning. But basically like take those, big goals and dreams and stuff and really chunk them down. So if you've got, 5-year, 10-year, 5-month goals, it's really easy to say, I want to get to here, right? Like I want to get to 500 million, or I want to lose 50 pounds, or I want to be able to run a marathon. But you've got to take that and like chunk it down into much more manageable goals that you can track and look at every single day, and make it just way more attainable, because, to scale them out, you still got to do it step by step. But you've got to understand what those steps are.
Dope. So you would tell yourself, hey, look, break down those goals that you have. Don't just focus on the big picture. I think a lot of times, even online and especially because of the area of social media, we always see everybody at the end of the goal, but we never see them like through the process of step 1, step 2, step 4, even going back to step 1 where they fail and they crash and burn and they have to rebuild everything.
Yeah.
So I love that.
One thing that really helped me was as I was working on like getting our podcast going and doing some of the social media and stuff, I was big into the Joe Rogan podcast at the time. And he just happened to post either a screenshot or the original video from his first ever podcast. And it was brutal. It was awful. It looked terrible. They didn't realize they were recording for like a couple minutes. The quality was terrible. And it was like really cool to see somebody like that go from that's where they started to, now top 5 podcasts in the world. And I started doing that with a lot of other people. And it's tough to see that when you just see somebody that's successful in business or in real estate, because there's no recording of going backwards and easily being able to see where they were 3, 5, 10, 15 years ago. But if you go to somebody's social media page that has a decent sized following, oftentimes you can see a lot of their earlier posts unless they've deleted them. But I started like just going to the people I would follow, and I started scrolling all the way to the bottom and seeing their first posts. And it was really cool to see the transition that people were making. And a lot of times it coincided with either their following or their success. And, sometimes people delete it because they think their feed is like this, holy grail and has to be perfect. But if you find those people that you can scroll back to, post number 1, it's pretty cool to see that transition.
No, exactly. I totally agree with you. Now, question number 2. If you had to be an expert in another space besides multifamily real estate investing, what would it be and why?
I would say probably marketing, because I think you can build almost any business on the back of marketing. Because if you can buy something for one price and sell it for more, you have a business.
All day, every day. If you get a customer for $1 but then you make 2, I mean, that's a perfect business model all day. So yeah, I totally agree. And I'm a fan of marketing. I geek out on marketing. I have like tons of marketing books. I mean, my whole probably half of my bookcase is all marketing books. So yeah, I think in real estate too, marketing is your biggest probably expense, right? I guess I shouldn't say right
expense,
like I know.
Yeah, biggest expense is taxes and management costs. So part of management is marketing in a way. But marketing itself is not your biggest cost. Reason being, and it's probably polar opposite to a lot of, I would say probably most businesses. I think payroll is like the largest, and then your second is oftentimes marketing. And again, I'm not an expert, so I'm spitballing a little bit. But because housing is such a need, you don't have to spend as much marketing on it because there's such a baked in demand for customers, which are your renters and your tenants. People don't think of them as customers, but they are. There's such a baked in demand, you don't necessarily have to spend as much. You can kind of get away with it a little bit more than some other businesses.
Oh, dope. So we'll definitely get into that. Now, last question is, what is one value you believe all men should learn to make it a better place for everyone?
I'm flirting between self-awareness and kindness. Yeah, I'm leaning towards self-awareness because I think if you can become ultimately very self-aware of like who you are and fit into the world and how you relate to other people, I think kindness is a natural what's the word I'm looking for? Output from that, or like a natural occurrence from that. So if you just can be really self-aware of like, how other people are so different and other people have really different experiences and everybody's, a human just like you, and also self-aware of like your own strengths, weaknesses, biases, understanding, limit of how you can understand other people. I think people would go a lot further and have really, better relationships and just a better overall experience.
Oh, I totally agree. I think self-awareness for a man is like the most important thing because it exposes you to yourself in a way where once you expose yourself to yourself, then now you freely give other people space to mess up. You give them a whole bunch of grace and kindness as well, and it just makes for a better conversation, better relationships, and a lot more understanding. So I 100% agree with you, and I love that. I love that, man. So
The greatest part of that too is once you have the, self-awareness is great. And once you can start understanding your weaknesses, once you have the capability of bringing on people to help you, whether it's, friends, family, or, employees or outsourcing people, and you start offloading those things you don't like or you're not strong at, your life gets a hell of a lot better. I can tell you as I've started going through the process of, hiring people, outsourcing things, finding the things that you hate or suck at and being able to give it to somebody else and not having to worry about anymore, it just makes your life a million times better.
don't you? I feel like you like. I love my business even more once I like offloaded all my social media stuff. I love my business so much more because I'm like, oh, I don't have to think about that. I have to think about what to post. I just gotta do this. And I get to go my zone of genius. I don't know in your business, like what do you like most about like in real estate? What do you like most? And like what's your zone of genius, would you say?
Mm, I would say it's two, but I think they go hand in hand. I would say networking is a big one. I would also say putting deals together is another one. Like I will drop almost everything when a new deal comes to me just to like play around and see if it works and look at the numbers and like look at rent comps and sales comps and what's the opportunity. And, I'll dive in deep to that stuff. So that'll probably be like one of the last things I give up. And I think it's something I'm good at.
Perfect. No, I totally love that. So today we're going to talk about multifamily real estate. Now, and the real estate has really exploded online. Before it was just Rich Dad Poor Dad. Everybody knew that like if you wanted to learn, you went to Rich Dad Poor Dad and you went to his seminar, you learned real estate. But now it's like exploded. Everyone's teaching real estate. Everyone's doing real estate. But the one thing about you is you're doing multifamily real estate. Why is multifamily real estate such would you say the most ideal for beginners to get started with? Or do you even think it is ideal for beginners to get started with multifamily?
So I do and I don't. I firmly believe the best way for anybody to get involved in real estate on the ownership side is to house hack, which is oftentimes a form of multifamily real estate. And what that is basically you buy, and you can do it with single family, but you would be renting out rooms, which a lot of people don't want to do, right? You want your own space with a door so people can't come in. But, it's buying a, 2 to 4 unit property. And what you can do is use a low down payment loan, like an FHA loan, to purchase it. You still have to qualify it like a normal, low down payment loan on a single family home if you were just buying it for yourself. So you still need the, the income, the debt to income, all the requirements for that. But what you can do is live in one unit, rent out the others, and that money will go towards all your expenses, your mortgage payments, your taxes, your insurance, any repairs and maintenance, any vacancy, stuff like that. And it's a great way to purchase a property for not a lot of money with a high amount of leverage, which normally I am very against. I don't like when people purchase investment properties with a lot of debt on it, because people think, oh, leverage is this great upside. Well, it's also greater downside as well. But in this case, you qualify for the loan based on your own personal income. So God forbid, let's say you bought a 4-unit deal. If all the other 3 units went vacant, well, your income supports the full mortgage payments. So in your worst case scenario, you can still afford that. Now, if your own personal financials get messed up and you can't afford it, that's on you. But you should, in theory, be able to afford it. So that's why, for me, it's the best way to buy something with as little money as possible without tons of risk. So I think that's the best way to get involved. Once you go beyond that, whether it's the best or not is really dependent upon everybody's criteria, resources, goals, etc.
Yeah. I think the one thing I love about multifamily is that the fact that you can have multiple families in there, and that it's not like single family, like you rent out a room to one single person, right? Which that means that there's one sole income in there, but multifamily, it's multiple families in there. So it's multiple incomes, and likelihood of if someone loses their job, there's probably somebody else in the family that can, step up and still pay rent. And it's not a burden on everybody, and it can still be spread out. You know what I'm saying? You can kind of spread out those let's say losses, but you can spread out that loss of income to everybody. So when it comes to multifamily investing, how did you find yourself into this space? Give us like a quick story, like 5 minutes, or let's say 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Your story of how you came into multifamily.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if we'll be able to do it in 2 minutes, but I'll keep it brief. I graduated college in 2014. I did a year as a Division II assistant soccer coach. I played Division I, so it was a natural progression. Did that for a year, didn't love it. Realized I wanted to do something else. So I spent the year in Massachusetts. I moved back to New York, where I was born and raised. Got another coaching job, but wanted to explore other jobs, and got a job as a cold caller for a stock brokerage company. Was there for about 6 months, got licensed, so passed my Series 7 and 63, stayed there for another 6 months, but I knew pretty early on it wasn't for me and I didn't love it, but I really enjoyed business, investing, different opportunities. So I knew that I wasn't really in the coaching world anymore and I was going to transition out. When I got licensed, I was really already starting to look for something else. And it just so happened my mom and my cousin had bought a single family flipping course. So they invited me along to the, weekend seminar. And that was my first introduction into real estate. I knew literally nothing before that. Went there, fell in love with it. They also do a good job of selling you, but we tried to do that for several months on Long Island, New York, and completely failed for, 6, 7, 8 months. And while we were doing that, though, we were networking a lot, meeting different people, learning about new strategies, really engaging ourselves in the community and the atmosphere. And we realized that a lot of people were actually doing it out of state, which was not apparent to us. So we started looking at that because we thought there were problems with the New York market. Now, we failed for our own merit, but we knew there were bigger barriers as well. Just lower margins, higher competition, high property taxes, high holding costs, just things we weren't really thrilled about in general. So we decided to go out of state, partnered with somebody on a flip, and his cousin happened to be John Cohn, who's one of the owners at Tor Real Estate Partners, where I ended up working for about 4.5 years. I'll get to that in a moment. But John and the three of us started talking about different things. He introduced us to tax deeds in Philadelphia. We dabbled in that, didn't love it. Eventually, he had transitioned from that stuff into small multifamily and was transitioning into large multifamily. But he was still doing some small stuff on the side. So we partnered on an 8-unit deal in Northern Kentucky, a 17-unit portfolio in Northern Kentucky, and an 82-unit deal down in Jacksonville, Florida, where I currently happen to be. But I was still in New York at the time. as those were happening, I was ready to leave my job as a stockbroker, but didn't have anything lined up. It just so happened John and his partner Don at Toro, where they worked on much larger properties, were under contract on the third deal, were looking for some help as things were going on, and just right place, right time. Was sitting down with John. He's like, hey, why don't you come over on a trial basis and see how it works? Quit my job, went over there, and over 4.5 years, we bought about 4,000 units, about $300 million worth of property. And my role evolved into running all of our stuff down in Florida. So in Florida, we had about 1,000 units, about $70 million worth of property. I ran it. I found the deals, ran the deals, operated the deals, mostly sourced the debt, raised a lot of the money, basically was a company within a company to some degree. And then last year in 2020, I wanted to buy a property on my own. So found this 16 unit deal down here. Wasn't planning on leaving, but as I put it under contract and was in the process of closing it, kind of just got the idea in my head that, this could be a good opportunity to go off on my own, because that was always a goal for me, and ultimately decided to do so. And while I decided to leave, I decided to move from New York to Jacksonville, Florida, where the deal I was buying was, to allow me to be boots on the ground and also do the management of the properties myself. So I moved down here in November 2020. We closed on that deal. And then we actually closed on our second deal in February to bring us up to 40 units. So a 16 and 24. And yeah, that's where we're at today.
Wow. And you want to scale all the way to 500 million. So how many units does that look like for 500 million?
Who knows where we're going to be in 10 years. So it'd be really tough to say. In today's environment, first off, depends on what assets you're buying, right? If you're buying Class A construction, you're talking about 200 a door ish. So you would be around 2,500 units. If you're buying Class C or in like really tertiary or smaller markets, it could be 5,000 plus. In 10 years from now, my guess is it'll be somewhere in the 2,000 to 4,000 range, but you never know.
Exactly. So I probably want to take it way back. And I want to start with someone that's brand new. They want to get into real estate. They see, they probably been to a seminar. Like I've been to seminars before. They do a really good job in selling you. But then the price point to go again, work with them is like, okay, I know I can't do this. Not that I can't, but sometimes I think I went to a seminar, I was like almost 50K and I was only making 30 or like 25K at the time. And I was just like, yeah, I can't, not saying no, I can swing this, but even on credit, I didn't have credit at the time. But someone that wants to get into real estate, they understand multifamily, they've seen it all around Instagram, Facebook, and all this. So how do we find deals? Is the first thing, should we think about, okay, hey, I want to go find a deal, or what's our first step of dabbling into multifamily and real estate?
The two things I would do is network like crazy, where you're going to learn 50% of what you know from everything that's free, right? Free resources, free videos, podcasts, books, the basics of how to underwrite, having that network is going to be huge. And then the other 50% you're going to learn by doing. Seminars and coaches and stuff are great, but what ends up happening is people give you rough estimates, and it's so tough, right? Like, I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is when we're buying a deal, we're underwriting the deal, we're analyzing it. We're putting numbers on paper, we're looking at income, we're looking at expenses, rents, taxes, mortgages. But as soon as we close the deal, you throw all of that out the window, because you're never going to get it right. You're never going to know 100%, right? The rent you actually achieve, it might be higher, it might be lower. I would be shocked if you get it dead on the nail. And if you projected, let's say it was $1,000 and you're getting 1,000, well, realistically, you're not doing a good job, because good chances you could probably get slightly higher. The chances your rent is going to be exactly 1,000 is pretty low. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But those things shift over time. So, I always say, like, the easy part is buying a deal. The hard part is actually operating the deal. Now, I'm not advocating that you overpay for a deal or just buy the first one that you see, but at some point you just got to buy a deal and figure it out. And that's why I'm not a big proponent of getting too much debt, because when you do get too much debt, it's great from the standpoint of that, okay, yeah, if I have a deal that goes from $100,000 to 120 and I only put down 20, I doubled my money instead of making 20%. But conversely, if that $100,000 deal goes to $80,000, well, instead of only losing 20%, you lost 100%. And a lot of people don't think like that because everybody's like, oh, real estate just goes up. It's not really the case, right? Talk to anybody that bought stuff at the tail end of 2008, at 2007 and beginning of 2008. Good chance they have not gotten back to where they were, depending upon, your market in your area, stuff like that. So I think there's a ton of resources. There's a ton of education you can do. You can learn from a bunch of people. But at the end of the day, you've got to try it and figure it out. Now, not saying you have to do it alone. You can partner with more experienced people. You can invest in other people's deals. You can lend people money. There's all sorts of ways to bridge that gap between the two. But just understand that, hey, if I'm going to partner with somebody or give somebody else some money or try to do something, you're going to give up something for that, right? You're either going to give up returns or give up percentage or or give up control of the deal. There's nothing wrong with that. But you just got to understand that. And that's the way I got involved. So the first deal I did, I actually invested in the deal and didn't have any control. And then we basically just, asked, hey, can we, work with you? Can we partner with you? Things like that. Partnered with John on the side. Then eventually I went and worked for somebody for, 4.5 years. And then, now I'm doing my own thing. Not saying everybody has to do that, right?
Yeah.
But, there is you're gonna pay for your education in one format or another. But I think your best bang for your buck is buying a deal and making some mistakes and figuring it out, and hopefully you don't make massive mistakes. So definitely anybody that's doing a deal, spend money on lawyers, spend money on inspectors, spend money on accountants, because those are the big spend money on insurance, because those are the big things that can really make you lose out big time.
So what I'm hearing you say is that the biggest thing at the end of the day is that if you really want to get involved in multifamily, you can go to YouTube University, you can go to Bigger Pockets, like read all the forums, listen to all the podcasts, your own podcast. You can do all that, but that's only going to be 50% of it. But the other 50% is just going to be actually going out there, looking at deals, walking through properties and all that too. So I think the biggest thing I think would be helpful is how do we find these deals? I know you said networking and such, but what type of networking? Where are we going? Who are these people? Is there a certain place we should go to go network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, meetups are helpful. Your RIAs are helpful. Now there's so much online, especially with that. RIAs are real estate investment associations. So like all your local areas have them. Just meeting with people and connecting with people. One thing that I love to do is when I moved from New York to Jacksonville, I already knew some people here, but I would set up meetings and then I always try to leverage those people into other people. So I say, hey, if you know of anybody that you think would be good for me to meet, let me know. Would love to be connected, and I'll do the same, because those are way better introductions and people you meet, and then you sit down and you meet more people. So leverage your contacts already to meet other people. Ask them for 1 to 3 other people that you think would be good for you to meet or talk to, whatever. Finding deals though is tough, because the great deals or the best deals or the home runs, those usually are not deals you see listed on the market or popularized out there. They're going to the guy that's been in the market for a while, does deals, somebody brings it to him because they know they do it. Most of the time, everybody's first deal is just kind of like either they overpay for it, or it's not the best deal in the world, or you buy something on market. It's just very rare that you find this amazing deal the first time out, because one, oftentimes you don't really know what the hell you're doing. And two, if I'm a seller or I'm a seller's contact and I'm going to make X, I want to make X as easy as possible. So let's say you own 1,000 units in a market and you buy the exact deal I have. Why am I going to call you over Bob Jones, who's looking for his first deal? Well, it's because I know you have a way higher likelihood of buying it with, little headaches to me versus somebody that's green and new is going to ask a lot of questions. Good chance they may or may not have the money. They may or may not have the financing. They might not understand certain things where, somebody like you, if you've done it a million times, it's less skin off my back and, an easier route to a payday. So there's nothing wrong with paying market or even slightly above market for your first deal to get you into an area to start to build that track record to then lead to better future deals. I'm not advocating for overpaying for deals. I always worry when I say that people are going to be like, oh, I'll just buy the first deal and, then my other deals will be better. No, I mean, still try to find a good deal that makes sense and on paper, but just understand if you're new and you're green and, just like, again, coming back to that self-awareness, right? If you haven't done it for a while and years and, had a lot of success and failures, if you've got this deal that looks amazing, it's probably too good to be true. Unless it's like really like a close family member or friend who somehow stumbled onto it and really has no idea what they're talking about. If it's coming through like real estate contacts and stuff, it just, understand that it may not be as good as you think.
So be super mindful about who's saying it and where's it coming from, so that way you understand what you're going through.
Yeah. There's been hundreds of times where I've looked at a deal and then I've heard about somebody else buying it and they're like, oh, it's this great deal that nobody else has seen and it's off market. I'm like, I offered like $2 million less than you like 90 days ago. And now you're going out there and you're telling everybody that nobody else has seen it and you're direct owner. And it's that stuff. It happens, but just be aware of, I'm always, the first question I'm asking when I see a deal is, okay, why am I buying this deal versus somebody else? Like, what is my competitive advantage? Why am I the best buyer for this? Why is this a great opportunity? Or, why has somebody else passed on this deal? And there could be really valid reasons, right? Somebody didn't have enough money. The guy that would have bought it before me, didn't have the capital, or, the second deal I bought, the guy that sent it to me, he buys the same type of deals. It was slightly outside of where he buys, and he had just fired his internal property manager. So he sent to me, he's like, oh, I literally can't buy this right now. So here you go. And I owe him a big thank you for that. So like that stuff does happen. But I also ended up meeting 2 or 3 other people that had looked at it and passed on it. And I was okay with the reasons for why they passed on it. We can get into it if you want, but, understanding what those reasons are and why you feel comfortable, is a big part of it.
Yeah. Could you break those down?
Yeah. So like for the second deal, I bought, it was actually a wholesale. It was actually a double wholesale. So it was, it's actually 6 quads. So it's not even a single 24 unit deal. They're very close together. There's about 50 of these buildings in this area. And this couple had owned 21 of these buildings since they were built in the 80s. They bought them from the original developer. Another couple had all 21 buildings under contract, but they couldn't close on all of them because they didn't have the money. But the seller didn't want to piecemeal them off. They just wanted one transaction to be done. They were retiring. So they were flipping 6 of the buildings in a wholesale. They flipped the contract to this guy that was then turning around and trying to wholesale it out. And he was coming up to his deadline and was struggling. So when I found it, I asked around, I heard that he had been asking for more and the price had dropped. And then 2, one of the biggest reasons people didn't like it was there was an HOA on the community. But when I dug in deeper, I was really confused how there could be an HOA because every building is its own building and on its own parcel. And there's no like community features. Like there's no like playground or clubhouse or pool that you have to upkeep. Each of the roof, there's no like roofs you got to worry about. And when I dug into the documents, the only thing the HOA really had power to do was you had to get approval for like, to keep the same type of fencing and, your paint colors and, little things like that. They did some maintenance by the sign and they did some trash pickup. And those owners were on the boards for technically 2 HOAs. So when I dug into it, I was like, that's not really like, they don't really do anything. They can't really stop you from doing anything besides they have a little control over what color your building is and what type of fence you put in. But it was a wood fence. So I was like, okay, like So I just have to stick to a wood fence, and I may not love the color of my building. There's worse things in the world. And the numbers were really strong to me. So for me, it wasn't that big of a deal. As well, too, it had to be an all cash closing within 3 weeks. So there wasn't a lot of buyers out there that would be able to come up with roughly $2 million in 3 weeks to be able to close the deal. So there was a small buyer pool for this, and I was okay with a lot of the objections that other people had.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you did your due diligence to go through the paperwork, figure out what was going on, why people pass on these deals. And I think that goes back to you saying networking. Because you network and because you knew these people, you were able to reach out, talk to them, and then have a better informed decision, and then make a better informed decision for yourself. And now look at where you're sitting, right? So
Yeah.
so it's
No, I mean, look, it's 24 units. They're renting for like 715. We bought them for 80 a door, and we just turned a unit, and we've got about, I don't know, 40 applicants at $1,000. So, I mean, we just raised the rent $300 by spending $500. So I don't know, seems like a pretty great deal to me. So we'll see what happens over time. But, and it's even too, the networking is the reason I got the deal. I wouldn't have gotten that otherwise if I hadn't spent the time, to meet this guy, spend an hour with him, chat, understand what he's looking for, tell him what I'm looking for, and try to work together. So, that's why I'm a big proponent of it.
I love it. So really, when it comes down to multifamily, what I'm hearing is that it really comes down to networking, and it may not really come down to as much as like how much money you have, but mainly if you understand, hey, what the players are looking for in the game, you're able to maneuver. You're able to maneuver, and then also have do your due diligence too, as understanding real estate, understanding multifamily, understanding the paperwork, the comps, the numbers, and building that team. Is it in the same way? What type of would you say, what type of people do you need around you, like besides lawyers and a good tax accountant? But is there anything else that you found that maybe people aren't talking about that is you think is super important?
I wouldn't say there's not anything that people are talking about, but the big ones are, like you said, your lawyer, your accountant. Then you need somebody to get your insurance. So for residential, I think you can just get away with homeowners, but I've got a insurance broker that I use. It makes my life a lot easier. A mortgage broker, I think it's worth its weight in gold. You don't have time to be going out and sourcing all your financing. Now, if you want to go to like, community bank or, a local bank, you can do that. But honestly, just underwrite the costs for the deal. So usually it's a point to the lender, point to the broker. Just buy all your deals with those costs factored in and you're good, right? Like why spend your time on something you don't need to? Your property manager is a big one. Same thing, right? Like don't try to make a deal work without your property manager because it's basically a second job. So factor in whatever the property management costs are going to be. If you don't know, call 3 property managers in the area, ask them what their fees are. Boom, you got it. Having a good general contractor on hand is good, but you can find them in a pinch. But that's where the networking comes in, right? Use your network to find good ones that work. Trying to think what else. Those are probably your biggest ones off the top of my head. I wouldn't say there's really a big unknown. They're pretty well documented and known.
Okay. So at the end of the day, I think real estate really comes down to taking action, right? It really doesn't come down to much. So what stops people from really diving in then? Do you see on your end, with all your experience? So what stops people from like jumping in and doing multifamily real estate?
I think it's the same thing as anything else. It's the fear. People don't want to, the fear, the worst case of real estate is you buy something that's a piece of shit and it's worthless in 6 months, or, you've got a terrible tenant that you can't get out and now you've got to pay the bills for. You hear about these things happen and they do happen, but the percentage likelihood of it happening is not very high. And if those are the things you're worried about, you just buy a less risky deal, right? You buy a marketed deal in a better submarket that's newer built where you don't have to worry about, all the headaches or problems that can occur. And you can learn more about the other things first. And then your next deal can be, more risky. It can be a little bit older. So that way you get slightly better returns because you don't have to, you have to deal with the headaches of water heaters getting old and AC condensers getting old and, plumbing going, things like that. You can buy the deal that is less occupied and you can turn it around and lease it up and, slowly over time. You don't have to buy this great deal that's going to double your money in 2 years in your first deal by taking on all these problems if you're not ready for it. There's a lot of other things to learn as you do it too. So I think a lot of times people want these crazy returns in real estate that they hear about. So they automatically go for these, value add, opportunistic, crazy high returning deals when, you don't have to do that.
Mm. So really taking a step back and understanding what are you willing to risk and where you're willing to go to as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that people really get confused about in investing in the grand thesis is it's all about risk reward. At the end of the day, when you're buying a multifamily deal and you have a cap rate, that's basically saying, okay, if I bought this deal all cash, what percent return would I make per year? Right. So if you bought, $100,000 building, $1 million building, and you had a 5 cap, you're going to make $5,000 or $50,000 a year if you bought it in cash. That's what that is saying. So it's the same thing as if you bought a bond and it said you're going to make 2% a year. It's the same concept. If you bought $1 million worth of bonds and you made 2%, you're going to make $20,000 a year. But a bond is, in theory, depending upon where it comes from, less risky than the real estate, which is why the reward reflects it. It's the reason cap rates and debt has become cheaper and cheaper. It's because things like the US Treasuries, which are like, kind of the status quo of risk-free investing, have dropped to basically zero. And it's why other countries now that have, negative, negative rates for borrowing, is why, returns are so low, because people are giving money to the government to cap their losses, which is crazy to me. So it's all about risk reward. So if you've got, 2 identical deals and one's going to make you 15%, they're both going to make you 15% a year, but one you just buy and you just, as people leave, you just got to increase rents and not spend a lot of money. And the other, as people leave, you got to spend $20,000 a unit and push rent $400. I'm going to do deal one every single day of the week because it's way easier. There's way less risk. Less things have to go right for that deal to work. Conversely, when you have that riskier deal, you want to get more upside because more things can go wrong. More things have to go right for you to do that. So that's what it is. So yeah, just, understand your, it comes back to that self-awareness game, right? Like understand your risk profile, understand what you're willing to do, right? If you're scared to lose your dollar, well, either invest it with somebody else, partner with somebody else, find a low risk deal to get your feet wet and get yourself in the game. If you're like, fuck it, I've got 20 grand and I'm okay if I lose it and I'll sign on a recourse loan and, maybe I'll owe the bank money, go for it, right? Like you're going to learn way more buying your first deal and going through it than you ever would by going to some coaching course or something else.
It's crazy that you say that because right now I'm in the process of saving my 25K to that way, well, 25K or more. I'm shooting for 25 at least. And then I want to use my VA loan to buy a 4 unit and then, live in one, rent out the other ones. And then after that to start, that's how I want to get into multifamily.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
best way, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, and plus you using that benefit on my side with the 0 down and you saving that money to just exactly how you said, a value add. So just adding value to my property so that way I can increase it because something that I learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with multifamily, it's especially I think with 4 units, I think 4 units or higher, it might be 5, but 4 units or higher is that when you increase the rent, that's how you increase the value of the property. The property value doesn't increase naturally like a single family house, right?
So it's a little bit of a gray area. So yes, you're right. So what happens is 1 to 4 units is still technically considered residential property, which is why you can get like the VA loan, the FHA loan, stuff like that. Once you go 5 units or more, you have to get a commercial loan. So when you get a commercial loan, there is no, house hacking capabilities, unless maybe you can find a 5 unit with like a community bank or something like that, but I've never heard of it. So rule of thumb, 4 units or less residential, especially for the loan. 5 units or more, yes. When you have these quadplexes and duplexes and triplexes, you still do have that an investor outlook where cap rates and returns matter, but you still have so many like end users and like unsophisticated investors that it still is a little bit like price per unit based or like total dollar based, where it's like this weird gray area. The more, once you start going, even still at like 5 and 6 units, you still have like people that are, you know, don't know as much to properly say it. But once you start going, 10 units, 20 units, 40, once you more up and up and up, then yeah, that's 100% true. It's really just because, what I see on a lot of the smaller stuff is brokers or agents will put, the rental income, and then the expenses is just the bare minimums, right? Your taxes, your insurance, any utility costs you have, and that's really it. Maybe landscaping, but they don't factor in things like repairs and maintenance, turnover costs, any, G&A, which is general and administrative, which could be things like, legal costs for evictions or accounting costs to file taxes. They don't always incorporate things like that. You've got to have capital reserves every year. So anytime you need to replace something, right? Like you've got to save up money for roof replacement. You got to save up money for when your water heater goes. You got to save up money for when your plumbing breaks, right? Like things break and you're going to have to spend money towards that. Like I have a buddy with a single family house that's been cash flowing double digits for 4 years. And then he had a water heater go out and it cost him like $4,000. And he basically wiped out all his cash flow for the past 4 years. So those are the things that, when you're doing numbers, you have to consider. And, the lower number of units, that doesn't happen with such regularity, right? When you have a 100-unit property, it happens several times a year, right? Water heaters go, plumbing has issues, like you just do those things. So it makes it a little bit easier to average out and have a budget for it. When you have 2 units, you might not have to replace anything for years, over a decade. But eventually those things are going to fail. Those things are going to need to be replaced. Those things are going to break. Unless you have a brand new constructed property, then yeah, okay, maybe you've got 7, 10, 15 years before some of that stuff starts to go, but eventually it's going to go and you've got to replace it. And that money's going to come from somewhere. And that's where I see a big problem. And that's why you see these deals where they trade for 7 caps, quote unquote, on paper. And they're not really that, because the agents, the brokers, the buyers, the sellers, they don't know how to properly allocate for that stuff. So it's there, but it's fake. So it's more on a per unit basis. So people just got to be careful with it.
Wow. So, man. So at the end of the day, kind of just recap this for everyone is first is you really want to network. First you want to just learn, just go out there and learn. So could you give us maybe like 2 or 3 people that you follow and that you think would be good for people to start learning from, in for multifamily, besides yourself, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Trying to think of guys who I really like that are putting out great stuff. I really like Antoine Martel. He does a lot of like single family wholesaling, flipping, but also does multifamily. So you get like a good blend of all of them. Really active on Instagram. I'm trying to think of who else is somebody. Guy named Kyle Grimm, but he does like the mobile home space, but still a really good guy to follow. Trying to think who else. Anthony Vicino is really great. They do stuff up in somewhere in Michigan. I want to say Twin Cities. Is that up there? Grand Rapids, Twin Cities, something like that. They do a lot of great stuff up there. Who else? I'm going to get beat up if I don't mention a lot of people, but there's a lot of great people. If anybody, and I'm not doing this just to say like, hey, go follow me, but if you follow me, you'll see I like mention and interact with a lot of people that talk the same. Dylan Marmot, he's not even really active on social media right now. Mike Tellervella is a really good one. He works for Jake and Gino. He's got some good stuff. There's a bunch of people, so I could go on for a while.
Got you. So I want you to plug yourself in. Be shamelessly plug yourself in. Be like, don't be humble at all. But why should people listen to the Real Estate Investing Experience podcast?
So the one caveat I'll throw in there is it's definitely not a beginner focus. So if you're like really, really brand new and you don't know a whole lot, like feel free to listen, but there's probably going to be stuff that goes over your head. Because honestly, John and I just set it up to just talk with whoever the hell we want to talk with, whatever the hell we want to talk about. So like sometimes it's kind of beginner focused, but a lot of times it's more like intermediate or advanced, I'll say, because we set up a podcast that we're going to enjoy doing and doesn't feel like a burden. So when I'm talking with people, sometimes we go like super niche and detailed on like underwriting or deal analyzing or capital raising. And then sometimes we talk super general about just like mindset or setting up business or, reading books, or sometimes we talk about like COVID and the market and things that are going on. So we kind of bounce around and just kind of whatever holds our interest. So I think from that standpoint, it comes around really nice, where it's just like genuine and, there's no like ulterior motive. Like I'm not asking about people's first deal. Like, oh, tell me about your first deal and how much money you made. And then, tell people where they can go invest with you, right? Like that, we didn't want that because there's people on there you can go invest with, and you can invest with any of us too. But, that's not like the point. The point is just to like have these conversations with people that we like, that we think are good, and let people kind of like listen in and hear like how we think about things and how we talk about things and things we're thinking about now and our opinions now, which could totally be wrong 12 months later. Like I was having this conversation with somebody else. They started listening to our early episodes, and she was like, oh, I wonder if things you said pre-COVID were wrong. And I'm like, I guarantee there were things I said that were wrong. Like that's the fun part of like talking and conversing and stuff. But, just hearing those thoughts, I think it would be helpful to anybody.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. Now you're active on Instagram. So where should people, I'll have it in the show notes for you, but do you have any other social media sites that you are active on besides Instagram?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I post on pretty much every platform. So, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok. But if you want to like reach out or really engage, more active on that side through Instagram and LinkedIn. So Instagram is at Chris.Grenzig, LinkedIn and every other platform. If you just search Chris Grenzig, it's some form of that. Like some have dashes and I don't know them all.
We'll put it in the show notes though. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if you just reach out to me and, DM or whatever, I'll usually get back to people pretty quickly.
Yes. Yeah, you definitely do. You definitely do. So, but this is the part of the show where I like to give the interviewee the last word. So the last word is a mantra. It could be a saying. It could be anything that you want to tell the listeners before we go. So what is something that you want the listeners and everyone listening and myself to carry with us in life before we go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that's been super visceral for me to kind of experience, and I think helps me get through the slow times, is the saying basically that we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in 5. And I fully believe in it. I think it's incredibly powerful and true, and I see it all the time. And I think sometimes what stops a lot of people is doing these little things, and things feel like they're moving slowly and they're not making as progress as they want, and just, sticking it out, grinding it out, putting their nose to the grindstone. And then, in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you really start to see those results build on top of each other, and really propel you further than you ever thought you would be.
Man, I love that. I definitely do love that. So Chris, thank you so much for coming on as well.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
And my brother and listeners, you heard it here first. Your legacy starts today. Thank you, my friend, for tuning into today's episode. This means so much to us over here at the 1% Man community. Now, we want to extend a hand of gratitude to you. So I have a free gift for you. All you have to do is go to www.the1percentman.com/podcast gift. This is an exclusive gift for listeners that tune into our podcast. So go over there, get that free gift as well. And now I have 2 simple acts of you. One, hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment and a 5-star review, because that helps us to see what you love about the podcast, and that helps us to bolster up in the rankings so more people can find us and listen to this pertinent information that we have for men of today's age. Last but not least, I want you to go back and listen to this podcast. Find just one thing that you can implement in your life today so you can move forward. Remember, progress over perfection. And till next time, my friend, your legacy starts today.